"Keep it up, goddammit!" Mike yelled into his helmet's microphone. "Sir, the barrels are going to burn up. We've got to let them cool down or else they're going to be useless." Sergeant Gilstrap answered in frustration. Mike knew the limitations of the tank's machine guns, but he'd been hoping to last more than 10 minutes into the fight. Each round that went down the barrel of a weapon caused the metal to heat up. When you put a lot of rounds through it in rapid succession, then the heat quickly spreads. When you put a hell of a lot of ammo through a barrel, the metal can get so hot that it warps and loses the factory shape, which then turns the 24-pound barrel of the M2A 150 caliber machine gun into a heavy hunk of useless metal. Shit, you're right. He hated that he was going to have to retreat, but his crew had poured thousands of rounds down the length of the tunnel, decimating the creatures that swarmed toward New York, and he needed to change barrels or else they were out of the fight for good. "Blue 3 and 4, move up! We have to let our barrels cool," the Chaos Company commander ordered into his radio, while Sergeant Gilstrap fretted with the replacement barrel for the M2. The large 50 caliber machine gun was mounted into the tank's CROWS system. The CROWS, Common Remote Operated Weapons Station, was a lethal weapons system that allowed the tank crew to fire the gun without exposing themselves to the zombies outside of the vehicle. It was joystick operated, and the display monitor was mounted in front of Mike to use as the tank's commander. Each of the tanks in C-101 Cavalry had the CROWS installed, and the captain knew that the system would be key in the fight ahead, as long as they could get the barrels changed. Mike turned in his seat and looked through the periscope toward the rear of the tank. "Driver, back," he ordered. The massive 72-ton M1A2 Abrams began to move slowly backward as Specialist Greeley blindly followed the commander's instructions from the driver's hatch, where he could only see toward the front. Through the periscope, Mike saw the 2 tanks from his 3rd platoon moving to either side of him as they came forward to fill the gap in the shallow line that his tank had created. His wingman, the company executive officer, was also pulling out of position so his tank could switch barrels too. The fight to save New York was fully underway. They'd made the trip from Hoosick Falls easily enough. It had been a surreal experience as they traveled southwest in their Humvees and trucks, shadowing the semis carrying the tanks down the highway toward the impending fight. The lanes leaving the city were jammed with cars who'd become hopelessly stuck in their mad flight from the danger to the south, while the lanes that they were in remained closed to traffic by the State Highway Patrol. Mike's chest swelled with pride as men and women cheered them on when their convoy passed the snarled traffic jams. The military was America's only hope, and the salvation of their country would start right here in New York. Chaos Company had quickly unloaded their tanks and gotten into position yesterday morning before the creatures arrived. Their mission was to block access to the city through the Lincoln Tunnel, while the other companies in the battalion performed the same task at the city's southmost bridges and tunnels leading from New Jersey. Other National Guard units secured the Tappan Zee Bridge, the next closest bridge to the city from the west, and there were rings of men along the north of the city in case the zombies somehow tried to flank the defenders at the main southern bridges. Mike had devised a rotating defensive strategy for his 14 tanks to address the 3 tunnels that emerged from under the Hudson River. His plan involved a section of 2 tanks in Overwatch and the other 2.5 platoons situated close to the tunnel's exit. 2 tanks were placed at each exit, firing into the gaping maw of the tunnel. When those tanks needed to rotate so they could change their weapons barrels or reload ammo, he'd call the second line of 6 tanks forward, while the section in Overwatch took care of any creatures that made it past them. The company headquarters platoon had the unenviable job of resupplying ammo to the tankers who were buttoned up tight in the safety of their metal behemoths. Further back, dismounted infantrymen had been set up to kill any zombies that made it past the tank company. They were the final line of defense. Given the situation and the terrain that they'd been assigned, it was the best that Mike could come up with. Ideally, they would have had enough time to completely block 2 of the tunnels and then defend the one so there could potentially be an escape route in the future, but time was against them. Mike summed it up to his troopers in the age-old Army axiom: "It is what it is." That meant stop bitching about the situation and deal with the facts that were presented to you because you couldn't change reality. By midday yesterday, the battalion's Alpha Company reported contact on Staten Island, and the men of Chaos had listened intently to the battalion radio frequency as the reports filtered up to the headquarters. By nightfall, Delta Company had begun fighting at the Holland Tunnel, and Alpha fought a retrograde operation to make it back to the Verrazano Bridge, which was held by the dismounted soldiers from the headquarters company. In less than 6 hours, they'd lost Staten Island.